After a full month of hero training, Fuda faces Riku in a practice match. Confident in the power he has gained, the high school hero warns Riku not to underestimate him, just because Riku looks like an ordinary older man. Fuda launches himself into the sparring match at high speed, forcing Riku to react immediately. The exchange shows how dramatically the young hero's physical ability has improved after only a month of training. Riku watches Fuda's speed and admits that reaching this level in a single month is impressive. Even so, he remains composed, while Fuda realizes that the older man is still keeping up with him. The story identifies the older fighter as Takayanagi Riku, an apparently average 32-year-old corporate employee. His ordinary life, however, has already been overturned by a secret that makes this second-world encounter very different for him. Riku notes that Fuda's speed would overwhelm ordinary castle knights, but his direct movements are still easy for an experienced fighter to read. While handling the attack, Riku reflects on how he somehow ended up in another world again. The spar continues at close range, with Fuda pressing the attack and Riku calmly meeting his movements. The contrast between the teenager's explosive power and Riku's veteran composure becomes increasingly obvious. 1 month earlier, Riku was still living as an overworked office employee in Japan. On an ordinary day, he noticed 3 high school students being caught up in something strange and stepped in, because he could not simply leave them in trouble. Riku and the 3 students are suddenly transported into a fantasy kingdom, where people greet the arrivals as long-awaited heroes from another world. The students are stunned by the impossible situation, while Riku quickly realizes that they have been summoned. Princess Epicharis of Rokaris explains that her world is being swallowed by the Demon King's forces. She says the summoning was performed because heroes from another world are believed to be the only ones capable of defeating the Demon King. The princess speaks as though only 2 heroes have arrived, confusing the group. Futa and Kana are the apparent chosen heroes, while Mizuki and Riku seem to have been dragged into the summoning by accident. The court explains that people summoned as heroes possess extraordinary abilities and can become powerful with only a little training. Fuda angrily points out that they keep talking about 2 people while completely ignoring Mizuki and Riku. The students object to being ordered into a deadly war and insist that their families back home will worry about them. They ask to be sent back and for the kingdom to summon someone else, a demand Riku considers perfectly reasonable. The summoned teenagers formally introduce themselves. The male hero is Okudera Futa, and the female hero is Himura Kana. Riku and Mizuki remain on the edge of the discussion, making the kingdom's unequal treatment increasingly obvious. The kingdom claims the summoning cannot simply be undone, and promises the heroes can return only after the Demon King is defeated. The officials then reveal that a neighboring kingdom has also become a serious threat amid the wider war. Riku studies the unfamiliar sky and its 3 moons, confirming beyond doubt that they are truly in another world. For him, the scene carries an unsettling familiarity rather than complete disbelief. The officials explain that travel between worlds is not something they can perform freely. Riku concludes that Fuda and Kana were the intended heroes, while he and Mizuki were accidental additions with no expected special abilities. Fuda confirms that the kingdom will at least protect the 4 of them inside the castle. The answer makes clear that the court values the 2 chosen heroes far more than the accidental arrivals, which Riku quietly notices. Riku introduces himself to the teenagers and calmly learns their names, including Kana, Futa, and Iguhara Mizuki. The others are surprised by how composed he is despite being stranded in another world. Riku quietly warns the group not to assume the kingdom's promises are harmless. If Fuda and Kana become strong enough to defeat the Demon King, the kingdom could also have a reason to control them rather than simply let them leave. Riku points out the dangerous logic behind the summoning. Once the heroes possess overwhelming power, nobody in this world may be able to stop them. That means the kingdom could try to secure leverage before the heroes grow beyond its control. Riku tells the students not to be swept along by the kingdom's pace and to keep their guard up. His calm warnings make them realize he has far more experience with dangerous situations than an ordinary salaryman should. The group is escorted deeper into the castle and presented with lavish food. Although the meal looks tempting, Riku treats even this hospitality with caution because they still do not know the kingdom's true intentions. When one of the students nearly accepts the food without question, Riku warns them not to eat or drink anything offered by people they do not yet trust. His strict survival advice begins to establish him as the practical adult of the group. Riku reintroduces himself and questions Princess Epicharis about the kingdom's real objective. She explains that Rokaris is fighting the Demon King's forces, but its worsening conflict with neighboring Elatoria has become an equally urgent problem. The princess says food and goods are running short and negotiations with Elatoria have failed, leaving the two kingdoms in a cold war. Rokaris suspects Elatoria may have sided with the Demon King, but Riku challenges the idea of risking lives on speculation alone. Rokaris asks Fuda and Kana to formally train as heroes rather than immediately fight. The kingdom hopes that merely proving it possesses powerful heroes will pressure Elatoria into backing down and reconsidering open conflict. Riku recognizes the strategy as peace through military deterrence, but he remains cautious because he still lacks reliable information. He decides there is no reason to commit the students to Rokaris' side before understanding the political situation. The group agrees that Futa and Kana can undergo training for now, but Riku refuses to treat that as a promise of cooperation. He warns the young heroes not to become arrogant simply because the kingdom is praising their potential. The castle prepares separate rooms and says, several days will be needed before formal training begins. Riku notices how carefully the hosts are controlling the group's movements and how little private time they are being allowed. After guiding the arrivals away, Princess Epicharis' attendants complain about Riku, viewing him as an inconvenient commoner mixed in with the heroes. They had hoped the teenagers would be easier to influence without an experienced adult acting as their guardian. Riku tells the students to stop being overly formal with him and simply call him Riku. The casual request helps reduce the distance between them, even as he continues treating their situation with serious caution. Riku explains that Japanese common sense and laws cannot be trusted in another world. He warns that magic could include coercion, curses, or enslavement, so accepting agreements blindly could be far more dangerous than the students realize. Riku bluntly tells the teenagers that they can actually die here. If they want to survive a world whose rules they do not understand, they must become smarter and more suspicious. Instead of relying only on newly granted power, left alone, Riku senses mana again for the first time in many years. The familiar sensation confirms that the magical abilities from his previous otherworld adventure may still exist inside him. Riku tests the room to make sure nobody is listening, and then experiments with magic. When something responds, the students are stunned that the supposedly powerless older man appears able to use magic at all. The teenagers tease Riku for looking excited enough to be a fantasy-obsessed old man, but he ignores the embarrassment. He decides to demonstrate a simple spell and see whether the magic from his first adventure works in this world too. Riku begins the spell, but at first nothing visible happens. The others start to think his confidence may have been misplaced, while he concentrates on recreating the technique he remembers. The magical test suddenly takes effect, proving that Riku's old abilities are real. The unexpected result shocks the students, who had assumed he was merely another accidental summon with no special power. After the commotion, one of the students wakes in confusion and finds Riku nearby. The strange aftermath makes it clear that his experiment produced far more of a reaction than they expected. Riku confirms that he successfully used magic in this world. He then reveals the reason he knew how. When he was around the student's age, he once served as a hero in an entirely different other world. Riku finally states the truth plainly. This is his second trip to another world. Only now he is a middle-aged office worker, rather than a teenager. The revelation completely changes how the students see him. With Riku's secret established, the story returns to the present. After the heroes have begun their training, Fuda and Kana are developing their new abilities, while Riku quietly watches their progress and the castle's intentions. Riku evaluates the teenagers during training and concludes that they have good instincts and morals, but that also makes them vulnerable to manipulation. He decides he must keep observing both the heroes and the people training them. Futa begins formal combat practice, throwing himself into weapon drills with enthusiasm. Riku watches the young hero test the strength granted by the summoning. The training strike lands with impressive force, demonstrating how quickly Fuda's physical power has grown. His instructors and companions can no longer dismiss the blessing given to the summoned heroes. Riku observes Kana's training as well, noting that the Gyaru-looking girl is understandably frightened by the new world but is still keeping herself together. She practices with a Naginata-like spear and shows solid combat potential. Kana continues her weapon drills and displays unexpectedly strong arms and coordination. Riku recognizes that the summoning has enhanced her enough to make her a serious fighter, despite her lack of prior battlefield experience. The castle side celebrates the heroes' rapid growth and boasts that they will be able to crush Elatoria. Riku is more cautious, remembering that he was much weaker when first summoned in his youth and realizing how exceptional these teenagers' blessings are. The training period continues, as Riku keeps a close eye on how the castle develops each student's abilities. Rather than joining the officials' excitement, he focuses on understanding what each newcomer can actually do. Riku checks on Mizuki, the quiet girl accidentally dragged into the summoning. He learns she has a strong affinity for water magic and can already create water, while her past archery experience and love of fantasy novels make her surprisingly receptive to learning offensive spells. Riku explains the 4 basic elements: earth, fire, wind, and water, and tests whether Mizuki can use more than one. Her magic raises a larger question. If only the chosen heroes were supposed to receive powers, then the princess either misunderstands the summoning or is deliberately hiding something. Fuda and Kana return exhausted but excited from their regular training, while Mizuki comes back with Riku. Once all 4 are together, Riku's tone turns serious, signaling that he has decided it is time to share a plan, rather than simply continue obeying the castle. The students settle in, and Riku turns the conversation toward Mizuki and Kana. The sudden change in subject catches them off guard, but he is trying to make sure everyone is on the same page before they take any greater risks. Kana and Mizuki bicker like close friends, even jokingly offering Riku to each other, before the mood becomes more serious. Riku points out that if either girl has something important to say, now is the time, before a war begins and their lives become much less predictable. Riku refuses to dwell on painful experiences from his first otherworld journey, saying he does not want these teenagers to end up with the same regrets. He then tells the group that he has decided on a concrete next step. Riku announces that he plans to leave the kingdom in 1 month, though only temporarily. The students are shocked, but he reminds them that his constant warnings about caution were meant to prepare them to survive without depending blindly on the castle. Riku reviews the 2 reasons Rokaris gave for summoning heroes, defeating the Demon King and dealing with neighboring Elatoria. Because they have heard only Rokaris' version of events, he intends to cross the border himself and learn whether Elatoria is truly their enemy. Riku warns that if the castle has lied about the need to fight Elatoria, the heroes could be manipulated into killing humans. He plans to wait until Fuda and Kana can defend themselves against the Royal Knights, while secretly training Mizuki so the group can leave if necessary. Riku orders the Spirit Reach to stay hidden in the room so the castle does not discover it, then asks for everyone's phones. His unexpectedly mundane obsession with missed game login bonuses earns ridicule from the teenagers before he reveals that the devices have a practical purpose. Fuda reluctantly hands over his phone while teasing Riku about his hopeless adult lifestyle. Riku ignores the jokes and prepares to modify the devices with magic so the group can communicate safely outside the castle's control. Riku begins working directly on the phones, channeling magic into the devices. The students watch in disbelief as he treats modern electronics and fantasy magic as if combining them were perfectly normal. The magical modification continues, with the teenagers reacting in disbelief to what Riku is attempting. His previous world experience lets him experiment far beyond the simple spells the castle has shown them. Riku successfully powers the phones with ambient mana and adapts a teleportation-related spell so the devices can communicate in this world. He is unsure of the range, but the success gives the group a private method to stay in contact, even when separated. With the phone experiment finished, Riku casually announces that he is going out for a walk. The others immediately question whether wandering the castle alone is wise, especially when he is already suspicious of their hosts. As Riku moves through the castle, the teenagers privately wonder what he must have been like during his first hero adventure. His quick thinking and unnatural calm make it hard to reconcile him with the ordinary salaryman he claims to be. The conversation turns darker, as the students realize Riku may already have killed people during his first journey. His experience is not simply knowledge from stories. He has survived real battles and carries memories the teenagers have never faced. Riku decides to use his walk to assess the castle's military strength and locate Princess Epicharis's quarters. Because this world's magic system differs from the one he knows, he closely observes the knight's training rather than assuming old rules still apply. Riku watches sword drills and a basic fire spell, concluding that the knight's physical techniques are familiar, but their magic is comparatively straightforward. He continues studying them to learn what a competent soldier in this world can actually do. A knight demonstrates an aqua lance, allowing Riku to analyze the spell system more closely. He suspects the caster simply forms a clear image, feeds it mana, and releases it, though he remains cautious that this may only reflect beginner-level training. One of the better knights senses or notices Riku near the training grounds. Riku realizes that not everyone in the castle is careless, and that some soldiers are perceptive enough to become a problem if he keeps snooping openly. The knight confronting Riku turns out to be strikingly handsome and clearly competent. Instead of answering immediately, Riku studies him while being pressed to explain why he is wandering around a restricted area. Caught where he should not be, Riku rapidly invents an excuse. The knight recognizes him as the otherworlder who arrived with the heroes, making it impossible for Riku to simply pretend he belongs there. Riku claims he rushed out because he desperately needed a toilet and became lost, even pretending he was about to relieve himself on the training field. The crude performance embarrasses the knight, but gives Riku a plausible explanation for being somewhere he should not. The knight grudgingly saves Riku from his own ridiculous excuse and introduces himself as Pravas, captain of the White Light Knight Order. Riku is surprised that someone this high-ranking personally confronted him. Riku immediately notes that even Captain Pravas apparently was not informed about the hero summoning, suggesting the royal court is keeping secrets from its own military. He deliberately needles the captain, while trying to learn how much Pravas actually knows. The tense conversation continues as Riku tests Pravas's reactions and avoids revealing what he was really investigating. Both men recognize that the other is more perceptive than he first appears. Pravas explains that his old friend Nimros is involved with Elatoria and that peace still depends on negotiations, with war only if those talks fail. Princess Epicharis appears and is irritated to find Riku wandering with the captain instead of remaining under supervision. Riku complains that the castle treats him like a prisoner, even though he was summoned without consent. He reminds the princess that if Rokaris only wanted the heroes, it should improve the accuracy of its summoning, instead of restricting innocent people, dragged along by mistake. Princess Epicharis gives Riku a cold stare, but then unexpectedly apologizes for the inconvenience of bringing him here. Riku realizes he may have pushed too hard and backs off, rather than turning the argument into an open confrontation. Pravas remarks that Riku is fearless for someone supposedly powerless. Riku notices that the king and queen are absent and learns that the queen died when Epicharis was young, while the king has already stepped down or withdrawn from active rule. Pravas scolds Riku for his crude toilet excuse and tells him to call a maid next time rather than wandering off. Despite the rough exchange, Riku starts to think the knight captain is not a bad person and may be useful as an independent source of information. Princess Epicharis asks Pravas about Fuda and Kanna's progress. The captain reports that their movements are far too refined for complete beginners and confirms that the legendary blessing of summoned heroes is real, news the court expects to use to raise morale and intimidate neighboring states. The castle continues preparing the two heroes, while Riku quietly gathers information from the people around them. With the training period almost complete, the group is approaching the point where Riku's plan to investigate outside the kingdom can begin. 1 month passes, and Fuda challenges Riku after completing a full month of hero training. He confidently insists that a real hero cannot lose to an ordinary middle-aged man and charges in. Fuda attacks with impressive speed, but Riku immediately notices that the teenager's movements are still awkward. The raw blessing has made him fast, Yet his lack of battle experience remains obvious to a veteran. Riku concludes that Fuda's speed would overwhelm ordinary castle knights, but his attacks are too straightforward to trouble someone experienced. He continues countering the hero without needing to reveal his full strength. After Fuda's turn, Kana steps forward to spar with Riku. She enters confidently with her long spear, determined to prove that her month of training has made her a serious opponent as well. Kana uses the spear's long reach to dominate the distance between them. Riku acknowledges that as long as she controls the range, she holds a major advantage and can threaten an opponent before they are able to close in. Riku points out the weakness in Kana's style. Once an enemy gets inside the spear's effective range, the weapon becomes difficult to use. Kana is frustrated that he can exploit the flaw so easily. Mizuki finally gets her turn, using the secret magic Riku taught her away from the castle instructors. Riku watches closely to see whether her private training has produced techniques the others are not prepared for. Mizuki launches a large water attack, but Riku disperses it with the pressure from his sword. Rather than discouraging her, he immediately tells her to move to a higher tier spell and continue the test. Riku praises Mizuki's precise aim, which comes partly from her old archery experience. He also reflects that he avoided teaching her the exact magic system from his previous world because unusual techniques would attract too much attention. Riku dodges Mizuki's next spell and calls it predictable, prompting her to use the technique they practiced in secret. Even he is surprised by how far she has pushed the lesson beyond what he explicitly taught. Mizuki begins forming a concentrated water bullet, compressing her magic into a much more focused attack. The technique is clearly more dangerous than the broad water spells she used earlier. Mizuki fires the water bullet at Riku, forcing him to respond seriously. The compact spell demonstrates how much control she has gained during her month of hidden training. The exchange becomes a true combat test, as Riku meets Mizuki's spell rather than merely dodging. The power and precision of her magic show that the supposedly accidental summon has developed into a capable fighter in her own right. Riku explains that spells with equal mana output can neutralize each other, but warns Mizuki not to rely casually on such advanced tricks. The students complain that he has been teaching her dangerous techniques without explaining the risks. The teenagers realize that even together they still cannot force Riku to use his real power. Riku credits the 5 years he spent as a hero in his first other world, insisting that experience matters more than the blessing they gained in a single month. Riku explains that after defeating the Demon King in his first adventure, he was returned to his 17-year-old body and sent without even saying goodbye to his party. The students worry about missed school and whether their own return will restore the time they have lost. With the heroes now able to protect themselves, Riku prepares to travel to the neighboring kingdom and verify whether Elatoria is truly an enemy. Before leaving, the students give him a farewell present and warn him to be careful. Before Riku leaves, he gives the teenagers one last brutal lesson about real combat. Without warning, he uses a blade to create a genuine bloody injury in front of them, shocking Kana and the others who had only experienced controlled training until now. Riku lets the blood spill and even slumps down, forcing the students to confront the sight of a real wound rather than a harmless practice match. Kana freezes at the sudden violence, exactly the hesitation Riku wants them to recognize. Mizuki and Fuda stare in horror at the blood covering Riku's hand, while Kana reels from what just happened. Riku watches their reactions carefully, treating the disturbing demonstration as a test of whether they can function when a fight becomes real. Once the lesson has landed, Riku casts a healing spell and restores the injured hand. The wound closes under his magic, confirming that he never intended to leave himself permanently harmed. But the students are still shaken by how far he was willing to go. Riku admits he deliberately used a real blade and enough blood to make the experience convincing. Kana complains that her hand still feels wrong after the shock, while Riku explains that he wanted them to understand what stabbing a person actually feels like. Riku warns that their first genuine fight against another human will be nothing like training. If they hesitate when an enemy tries to kill them, that hesitation can be exploited instantly. So survival may require striking without freezing. He continues the grim lesson by telling them not to assume an enemy will stop after losing a limb or suffering a wound. In this world, a half measure can still get them killed. And they must understand that lethal combat does not follow Japan's rules. Mizuki realizes Riku used his own body because he did not want the teenagers' first experience of blood to happen when their lives were at stake. Kana calls the method extreme, but Riku apologizes and insists he needed them to understand how different this world is from Japan. The group falls quiet after Riku's harsh demonstration. The mood makes clear that his departure is no longer just an adventure. Everyone now understands that the road outside the castle could involve real human violence. Riku suddenly decides on a way to make leaving the castle easier. Instead of quietly requesting permission, he comes up with an idea that will give the royal court a reason to let him go. Without realizing it is part of his plan, Riku puts the plan into action by creating an outrageous scene in front of Princess Epikaris. Kana loudly accuses him of staring at Mizuki's chest, turning the situation into an embarrassing confrontation that draws the court's attention. Kana and Riku escalate the fake argument, trading insults about perversion, gender, and the hero's importance. Their performance is intentionally excessive, making it look as though the group has genuinely fallen out. Kana declares that Riku should leave the castle and find a way back to Japan on his own. Behind the performance, Riku recognizes why the court would prefer him gone. Without an adult interfering, the royals could manipulate the teenagers far more easily. Princess Epikaris warns Kana that the outside world is dangerous and that Riku, believed to be powerless, could easily be killed, especially with war approaching. Kana keeps acting furious and insists she would rather have him leave than remain trapped in the castle with the supposedly perverted man. The princess finally accepts Kana's demand, and the staged argument achieves its purpose. Riku realizes the court had little intention of genuine negotiation from the start, while outwardly acting satisfied that he can now leave the castle. Afterward, Kana proudly asks whether she performed her part well. The girls continue teasing Riku about actually looking at their bodies, while he complains that living around high school girls has made every accidental glance into evidence against him. Riku decides to travel alone while Fuda, Kana, and Mizuki continue training in the castle. He tells them to contact him through the modified phones if anything changes and warns them not to become so strong that the princess uses them to push for war. Captain Pravas arrives with supplies for Riku's journey and briefly trades competitive remarks with Kana. He has brought tools, medicine, and equipment, chosen specifically to improve Riku's chances of surviving outside the capital. Riku is impressed by the quality of the gear Pravas selected. The captain downplays the favor, but the equipment, medicine, and careful preparation reveal that he is genuinely trying to keep Riku alive, despite their earlier arguments. Pravas quietly asks whether Riku is actually far stronger than he pretends to be. He also advises him to visit an adventurer's guild for work and information once outside the castle, then mentions that Minister Yam has left a message for him as well. Riku receives a passage permit that will let him through the castle gate and many places within the kingdom. He thanks Pravas, who grumbles that he is only following orders, while both men avoid openly discussing what they already suspect about the royal court. Pravas wishes Riku a safe journey, only for their farewell to devolve into another argument about Riku's crude toilet story. Riku finally leaves before the captain can keep lecturing him. Kana gives Riku a ribbon from her uniform as a keepsake, and makes him promise to return it. The gift becomes a symbol of their shared goal. All four of them must survive and eventually go back to Japan together. Fuda and Mizuki also tell Riku not to die as the castle gate opens. Riku answers casually, then steps through the massive gate and finally begins his investigation outside the protection and surveillance of the royal court. Once outside, Riku enjoys the feeling of traveling again after so many years. He keeps his spirit companion hidden and scolds it for emerging where someone might see, reminding it that secrecy is essential until he understands the kingdom better. At the Adventurers Guild, Riku asks about traveling to Elatoria and is immediately warned that the border is dangerous with war approaching. The guild master openly admits he was instructed to report Riku's movements back to the castle. Riku appreciates the guild master's honesty and confirms that his permit gives him broad freedom to travel. He learns the trip to Elatoria will take roughly 7 days by carriage to the border, and several more days beyond that toward the capital. Before leaving, Riku asks about the Demon King's forces and the history of the current conflict. The guildmaster explains that about 50 years earlier, a strange race appeared on an isolated southern island with lesser devils and monsters, beginning the long war against the human kingdoms. The guildmaster says, the demons have largely remained on their island and are currently resisting rather than openly invading everywhere. He warns Riku that the guild exists to share practical information, then tells him to stay alert for monsters and danger outside town. Riku buys provisions and a tent and starts searching the market for a horse. He notices that the streets and commerce resemble the world from his first adventure, even though the tension of approaching war hangs over the town. Riku realizes Minister Yam's advice to visit the guild was probably meant to make his destination easy to monitor rather than pure kindness. He accepts the surveillance because he needed the information anyway, and continues looking for transportation. At the horse market, a seller tries to push an expensive animal on Riku for 20 gold coins. With only limited money left after buying travel supplies, Riku recognizes that the merchant is deliberately offering him an overpriced horse. A boy named Ted interrupts the negotiation and begs the merchant to buy his old horse so he can purchase medicine for his sick mother. The dealer refuses, claiming old horses have little value, and angrily orders the child not to interfere with business. Riku watches Ted being driven away and recognizes the familiar misery of a poor child trying to help his family. The scene reminds him that poverty and desperate bargaining are not unique to this world. Instead of buying from the merchant, Riku turns his attention to Ted's old horse. His soft-hearted decision surprises the people around him, especially after he had been acting like a hard-nosed traveler. Riku realizes Ted's family is probably malnourished, and that the mother's illness may be made worse by a lack of food rather than some mysterious curse. He follows the boy rather than treating the horse purchase as a simple transaction. Ted explains that his father left 2 months earlier to sell crops in another village and never returned. While he was gone, Ted's mother became sick, and the family ran out of money, leaving the boy with no option except selling their horse. Riku buys the old horse for an enormous 20 gold coins, far more than Ted expected, and asks to see the boy's mother. He assures Ted that the money can buy another horse later and still leave enough to help the family. Ted rushes home and excitedly tells his mother that Riku bought Harrier for 20 gold coins. The sick woman is stunned by the stranger's generosity and confused about why an unknown traveler is suddenly helping them. Riku examines Ted's mother and helps her stand, confirming that she is dangerously weak and undernourished. He tells the family to use the money on proper food and recovery, making clear that medicine alone will not solve the underlying problem. Ted asks how he can ever repay Riku, but Riku tells him to think of him as a weird old man doing what he wants. In return, he asks where Ted's father traveled and learns that the missing man, Thomas, headed toward the town of Michelle near the Elatoria border. Riku warns Ted not to trust every happy story he hears and says he will look for Thomas if his route takes him through Michelle. Ted thanks him and asks him to take good care of Harrier, the old horse he has just purchased. Riku leaves with Harrier, joking that he can earn more money later, even though the purchase has nearly emptied his purse. His spirit companion mocks him for pretending to be practical, while giving away almost everything to strangers in trouble. Riku begins the long road toward the border, with Harrier and his hidden companion. The quiet departure marks the true start of his independent journey away from Rokaris. While camping, Riku wakes from another dream about the companions from his first otherworld adventure, including Iris. The memories surface more strongly now that he is traveling alone again, leaving him nostalgic and uneasy. By the third day, Harrier is still moving surprisingly well despite his age. Riku thinks about Liche, Krez, Iris, and the old party members who apparently searched for him after he vanished, while quietly using healing magic to keep the horse in good condition. Riku's peaceful ride is interrupted when mounted strangers suddenly appear behind him. Realizing he is being pursued, he orders Harrier to gallop, while keeping his spirit companion close. The pursuers have younger, faster horses, so Riku knows he cannot win a straight chase. He turns into the forest and has his companion lead Harrier away, while he prepares to deal with the attackers himself. Riku confronts the group from an ambush position, and openly questions how they knew where to wait for him. Since only the guildmaster, the 3 students, and his companion knew his destination, He concludes that someone with access to that information arranged the attack. The assassins admit that Riku has figured out too much and decide he cannot be allowed to live. Their reaction confirms that the guild's report about his destination reached whoever hired them, giving Riku his first concrete proof that someone is trying to stop his investigation. The assassins rush Riku with swords, assuming a supposedly powerless commoner will be easy to finish. Riku instantly closes the distance and turns their own attack against them, asking again which of them was supposed to die. Riku's counterattack tears through the first wave before the killers can properly react. The ambush that was meant to trap him immediately begins collapsing under the difference in actual combat skill. The surviving attackers are stunned because they had been told Riku was an unarmed or powerless commoner. Their hesitation only gives him more time, and he orders them to stop staring and start fighting if they intend to kill him. The remaining assassins try to recover by surrounding Riku and attacking together. He counts only 4 opponents left and calmly prepares to cut through the encirclement rather than retreat. Riku moves faster than the attackers can follow, dropping another enemy and reducing their number to 3. The sensation of a blade entering flesh and blood spraying brings back memories of real life and death combat from his first Otherworld journey. As another enemy falls, Riku is disturbed to realize that he is smiling. The sight of a severed head reminds him of the first person he ever killed shortly after beginning his original hero adventure. Riku remembers that his first human opponent was the leader of a bandit group. Even as an inexperienced hero, he had been overwhelmingly stronger, and that first killing became the start of a change in how he experienced battle. The fight in the present continues almost effortlessly, but Riku's thoughts remain in the past. His body is reading the assassin's movements, with the same veteran instincts he once tried to leave behind. Riku recalls how killing dangerous enemies raised his reputation, and how later targets included traitors working for the Demon King's army. Over time, fear and guilt faded until fighting for his life began to feel disturbingly enjoyable. The final assassin tries to flee and report what happened, but Riku mocks him for finally showing speed only when running away. The man is shocked to discover that Riku can use magic in addition to swordsmanship. Riku casts Water Bullet at the fleeing assassin, using the same basic element he recently taught Mizuki. The spell races after the man before he can escape the forest. The magical attack strikes, ending the pursuit and leaving the ambush site silent. Riku stands among the defeated attackers as the adrenaline of lethal combat settles over him. With the danger gone, memories Riku spent years trying to bury surge back. The tension of kill or be killed combat feels frighteningly familiar, and he realizes how easily his old instincts have returned. Riku admits to himself that he may have been lying when he claimed he only fought to survive. Part of him has been yearning for this sensation again, a realization interrupted when his companions contact him. Kana, Futa, and Mizuki finally reach Riku through the modified phone and anxiously check whether he is safe. Their ordinary voices pull him back from his violent thoughts, and Riku silently vows that the teenagers must not become as emotionally damaged as he believes he is. The call ends with promises to speak again soon, leaving Riku alone with the aftermath of the ambush. His spirit companion remarks on how convenient the enchanted smartphones are, while Riku is still processing how close he came to enjoying the killing too much. Riku's companion notices the emotion he is trying to hide, and bluntly asks whether he is crying. The question exposes how strongly the call from the students affected him after the bloody fight. Riku sells the assassins' captured horses and suddenly has enough money to travel comfortably. He refuses to trade away Harrier for a younger mount, declaring that the old horse is his partner after everything they have already gone through together. The road toward the border is surprisingly quiet after the assassination attempt. Riku notices he has encountered almost no demons or monsters in Rokaris, and eventually spots Michelle, the town Ted said his missing father had visited. Riku enters Michelle and begins asking about Ted's father, Thomas. The search becomes a second objective alongside his investigation of Elatoria, because he promised the worried family he would check what happened. After selling the captured horses, Riku is carrying roughly 90 gold coins and jokes about suddenly becoming rich. He finds it strange that a border town remains so relaxed, despite supposed imminent war, and starts asking local merchants when they last saw Thomas. a vase seller, remembers Thomas arriving about 2 months earlier but says nobody has seen him since. Riku buys a vase while pressing for details, using casual shopping to keep the conversation friendly and productive. The merchant confirms that Thomas regularly came from the capital to sell goods and seemed much sharper than his appearance suggested. However, nobody in town knows what happened after his visit 2 months earlier. Riku learns that an unknown buyer offered extremely high prices for food supplies and gathered Thomas with several other merchants for a large transaction. All of those merchants then disappeared, leaving no clear destination or explanation. With Thomas's trail unresolved, Riku continues toward the border and finally heads for Elatoria. He jokes about storing the heavy vases he bought with magic, so Harrier does not have to carry the extra weight. The moment Riku crosses into Elatoria, the road becomes dramatically more dangerous. Unlike Rokaris, where he barely met any monsters, he now has to fire water bullets day after day simply to continue traveling. Another monster attacks soon after the border crossing, confirming that the increase is not a one-time incident. Riku is forced to fight constantly while trying to understand why the neighboring country is so much more dangerous. Riku remembers how easily he was allowed through the wartime border after presenting himself as a merchant. The lack of strict controls makes him question the claim that the two countries are genuinely on the brink of full-scale war. Local talk suggests the dispute is mainly over food and timber trade, and most people doubt it will become a true war. Riku concludes that only a small number of Rokaris officials may actually know about the planned invasion, which would explain why someone wanted his investigation stopped. Riku keeps his purpose hidden while dealing with ordinary merchants and travelers. Rather than announce that he is investigating Rokaris, he focuses on gathering information and surviving the increasingly frequent monster attacks. Riku grows nostalgic for how peaceful travel used to feel as yet another group of monsters appears. The sheer number of encounters in Elatoria is becoming impossible to dismiss as normal bad luck. He wonders whether Rokaris simply performs more aggressive monster extermination, or whether something unusual is causing monsters to concentrate in Elatoria. Either way, the imbalance does not match the political story he was given. Riku decides he may need to hide his abilities and identity more carefully while in enemy territory. During his cautious advance, he notices a unit of Elatorian knights nearby. The knights appear competent and are doing their patrol duties, but Riku spots a huge snake approaching from a blind angle before they notice it. He realizes the group is about to be attacked despite their training. Riku warns the Elatorian knights that a monster is nearby just as the giant snake closes in. The sudden alarm sends the unit into action. The snake is quickly brought down, and the knights check for injuries. They are startled by the powerful magic used during the rescue and begin asking who intervened. A female knight named Freya thanks Riku for saving them from the blindside attack. She assumes he must be a famous mage after seeing how easily he handled the huge snake, while Riku insists he is only an old traveler. Freya reveals that the unit belongs to Elatoria's Knight Corps and mentions Captain Nimros, the same man Pravas called his close friend. Riku immediately recognizes the connection and realizes he may have found someone who can help him reach the truth. When the knights learn Riku knows Pravas and came from Rokaris, they ask him to accompany them to the castle. Riku agrees because he specifically needs an audience with the king of Elatoria and information from the other side of the conflict. The soldiers initially keep their weapons ready because an otherworlder from Rokaris could be dangerous. Riku explains that Princess Epicharis may actually be targeting his life, and that his companions are effectively confined in the castle, then formally requests to speak with Elatoria's king. The knights decide not to restrain Riku after considering that he saved their lives. He notices that Elatoria appears to be suffering more severely from the halted trade, another sign that the political situation may be very different from Rokaris' version. One knight correctly identifies Riku as skilled with both magics and a sword simply from the way he moves. They lower their weapons because trying to restrain him could cause more damage than a monster attack, but warn him not to create trouble. Riku is told that being summoned from another world does not automatically prove his story. To strengthen his claim, he calls out his tiny spirit companion Riche, whose appearance and voice surprise the Elatorians. Riche happily emerges and stretches after being hidden for so long, delighted to walk around freely. Riku immediately has to manage the energetic little spirit, while the knights stare at the unfamiliar creature. Riku explains that creatures like Richi do not exist in Elatoria, and hopes showing her will support his claim of otherworldly origins. Richi herself is delighted by the attention, making the serious proof somewhat more chaotic than intended. Even with Rishi as evidence, Riku knows he cannot simply decide which kingdom is telling the truth. He resolves to hear Elatoria's side directly and judge the situation for himself. Riku is brought before Zanes, king of Elatoria, who is astonished both by Riku's story and by the tiny spirit accompanying him. Riku formally introduces himself while the king admits he has never seen a race quite like Rish. King Zanes introduces his wife, Madly, and their daughters, then acknowledges that he has heard of Rokaris's hero summoning ritual. He remains cautious, saying he cannot know whether Riku is friend or foe, and therefore has no reason to reveal sensitive information immediately. Riku studies the royal family and deliberately steps closer to the king's daughters, preparing to demonstrate why simply refusing information will not resolve the danger. The princess is tense at his unexpected movement. Riku coldly asks what would happen if he really were an enemy from a foreign land, pointing out that the king's unprotected daughters could lose their lives before anyone reacted. The threat is meant to force Zanes to treat the situation as an urgent security problem rather than a polite diplomatic visit. King Zanes immediately orders Riku away from his daughters. Riku steps back and sincerely apologizes, explaining that he was not trying to harm anyone. He only wanted the king to understand that he is capable of defending himself and cannot be treated as an ordinary powerless visitor. Riku states bluntly that, if he chose to fight, he could probably overpower every knight currently in the room. The claim is not simple boasting. The soldiers have already seen enough of his ability to realize he may be telling the truth. Riku turns the threat into a negotiation. He explains that 3 younger Otherworlders may eventually reach his level and suggests Elatoria could gain powerful allies if it gives him enough information to judge the situation fairly. King Zanes accepts the logic and formally welcomes Riku as a guest of Elatorius. The audience shifts from mutual suspicion toward an exchange of information, giving Riku the chance to hear the kingdom's side of the conflict. Riku reveals that Princess Epicharis told the summoned heroes Elatoria was under the Demon King's control and should be destroyed. Zanes is shocked because Elatoria has itself been repeatedly attacked by demons and has never joined the Demon King. Zanes explains that the dispute began around 5 years earlier when Rokaris demanded far more food in exchange for timber. After Elatoria refused, Rokaris cut timber exports in half, forcing Elatoria to buy expensive supplies elsewhere, while monster and demon attacks continued draining the kingdom. Riku notes that Elatoria's deserted streets fit Zanes' story of economic hardship. The king says repeated negotiations have failed, and Rokaris has recently begun hinting at war, while Elatoria's envoy in Rokaris has stopped reporting back and may have been eliminated. Riku struggles to reconcile this information with the kind face Princess Epicharis showed the summoned group. Even if Rokaris is under pressure from the Demon King, its demands are unreasonable, and Elatoria has no choice but to prepare for a possible invasion while monsters' numbers keep rising. The discussion ends for the night, and King Zanes tells Riku to rest after his long journey. Riku leaves the throne room with far more information than he had when he entered. Riku tells Richa that he is currently leaning toward Elatoria because its behavior seems more reasonable. He is especially struck that the royal family met him together rather than hiding behind soldiers, though he still refuses to trust either kingdom completely until he learns more. Riku is given a guest room and introduced to Sable, a woman assigned to watch him and provide anything he needs. He accepts the surveillance openly, knowing the castle would be foolish not to monitor a dangerous stranger from another world. Sable admits she is jealous of Riku's skill with both sword and magic, and mentions how impressive his movement was in the throne room. Riku is less pleased when she casually settles into his room, reminding him that her real job is to keep him under observation. When Sable follows Riku into his room without hesitation, he remarks on how awkward it is for a woman to enter a man's private room alone. She shows little concern, making it clear that duty matters more to her than the social implication. Riku attempts to relax but remains aware that Sable is watching every movement. The uneasy arrangement reinforces that, despite being treated as a guest, he is still under careful guard inside Elatoria's castle. Riku deliberately tests Sable's vigilance and catches her off guard, proving that even a trained watcher can relax too much. The exchange becomes another quiet lesson about never assuming a seemingly safe room is actually safe. Sable jokes that she thought Riku had fallen for her charms, which he immediately rejects by calling her a stick figure. After the childish argument, Riku finally returns to the serious question haunting him, whether a real war between the kingdoms will happen. Riku reflects that Elatoria has spent roughly 50 years fighting demons without major human-on-human warfare. Even trained knights here may have little experience killing people, a weakness that could become disastrous if Rovkaris truly invades. A sudden disturbance interrupts the quiet night. Riku and Sable immediately sense that something serious is happening outside the room. The castle erupts into alarm as soldiers begin moving. Riku realizes the emergency is not political intrigue, but an active enemy attack. Word spreads that demons are assaulting Elatoria. The peaceful castle instantly shifts into battle readiness as everyone rushes toward defensive positions. The alarm identifies the attack as a Demonkin raid. Freya and the knights head for the roof, and Riku sees a perfect chance to observe how Elatoria actually fights the Demon King's forces rather than relying on second-hand claims. Riku insists on joining the defense, frustrating Sable because she was supposed to keep him under controls. He covers his face so the demons will not recognize him, wanting to observe the battle without revealing that another powerful otherworlder is present. Sable finally gives up, trying to stop Riku, and leads him toward the fighting. She accepts responsibility for his involvement, while Riku privately admires the knightly resolve of people willing to charge directly into danger. Riku compares the Demonkin before him with the enemies from his first other world. In his experience, demons varied wildly in shape and intelligence, and the more human they looked, the more dangerous and high-ranking they usually were. From the castle roof, Riku studies this world's demon forces, instead of attacking immediately. He wants to learn whether their hierarchy and abilities follow the same patterns he remembers. The battle comes fully into view, revealing multiple types of Demonkins surrounding the castle. Riku watches the formations and begins separating ordinary troops from the real threats. Riku identifies a huge scaled brute and several flying monsters as likely low-ranking combatants. Their bodies are dangerous, but their behavior looks much simpler than that of the humanoid demons he knew before. A humanoid flying demon stands apart from the grunts, and Riku immediately suspects it is the commander. He concludes that Demonkin across different worlds may share surprisingly similar patterns, despite coming from entirely different realities. The humanoid demon is addressed as Demon King Consort Akiras. Reinforcements reach King Zanes and Freya, while Akiras continues pressuring the royal family from above. Akiras again offers Zane's power, in exchange for loyalty to the Demon King, including the prospect of crushing neighboring countries. Zanes refuses to surrender his daughters or kingdom, making clear that this confrontation has happened before, and that the demon's offer is nothing new. Riku sees that the flying demons are the defenders' biggest nuisance, because the knights cannot easily reach them. Nimrose and his men are holding the large ground monster in place, but Elatoria appears to have little practical flight magic. Freya and the other knights begin bringing down the flying grunts on their own. Riku is pleased that the local soldiers can handle much of the raid, leaving the humanoid commander as the true problem. Riku deliberately holds himself back, reminding himself that he is an anomaly who does not belong to this world's normal balance. If Elatoria's own people can solve their problems, he would rather let them do so than become the answer to every crisis. The defenders finally drop one of the stronger demons and cheer. King Zanes taunts the attackers, telling them to retreat as they always have, instead of pretending their small force can take Elatoria Castle. The humans grow confident after their success, but Akira's mocks how predictable they are when given even a little praise. Her reaction suggests the demons have been concealing something during their previous raids. Akiris decides to give the defenders a reality check and prepares a far more serious attack. The atmosphere changes immediately as the demons stops treating the battle like routine harassment. A powerful spell called Gihen Flare erupts across the battlefield. The defenders are stunned to discover that the enemy had been hiding magic on a completely different level from what they had shown before. The massive blast overwhelms the castle defenders and tears through their formation. What looked like another manageable raid suddenly becomes a one-sided catastrophe. After the attack, Akira's is essentially unharmed while the humans are devastated. She admits the demons were never giving their full effort during earlier retreats, and says Zane's should have accepted the offer while she was still being polite. Akira's explains that the demons deliberately held back all this time. Now that Zane's men are collapsing, she expects the stubborn king to become more cooperative under the threat of losing everyone around him. The demon commander casually injures Zane's and jokes about tearing off his arms next. His cruelty makes clear that the raid is no longer a show of force, but an attempt to break the king through pain and terror. Even as the demons threaten the royal family, they say they do not intend to kill everyone, because the humans are still useful. The defenders are trapped between surrender and being slowly dismantled. Freya refuses to stay down and throws herself back into the fight despite her injuries. Her allies warn her not to overdo it, but she will not watch the demons torment the king without resisting. Freya manages to wound the enemy, infuriating the demon who had dismissed her as worthless. Her counterattack proves the defenders still have courage even though they are badly outmatched. The demon retaliates savagely and smashes Freya down, enraged that she managed to scar its body. Freya collapses under the blow while Riku realizes that waiting any longer could cost someone a life. Riku hesitates for only a moment, frustrated that the locals could not resolve the battle without him. He had wanted this world's people to handle their own crisis, but now recognizes that refusing to intervene would simply mean watching them die. Riku finally enters the battle at full speed, crossing the distance before the demons can react. His sudden movement breaks the rhythm of the fight and draws every eye toward the masked stranger. He reaches the wounded defenders and unleashes fairy breath, a healing technique from his own magical system. Riku scolds them even while casting, prioritizing saving lives before confronting the enemy directly. Riku is relieved that his healing spell worked in this world, but he desperately wants to keep the unusual magic secret. The technique is clearly different from local spells, so using it risks exposing how abnormal he truly is. With Freya stabilized, Riku turns toward the demon responsible for injuring her. The enemy starts to realize that the newcomer possesses extraordinary speed and strength, making the masked old man a far more dangerous opponent than any knight on the roof. Akira's is shocked by Riku's speed and strength and demands to know who he is. Riku keeps his identity hidden and prepares a technique he considers too heavy for ordinary knights to handle, taking advantage of the demon's confusion. Riku unleashes Hail Cluster, filling the air with a dense barrage of projectiles. Akira's decides that charging straight through the attack is safer than stopping in place and being overwhelmed by the entire storm. Akira's forces through the hail and closes the distance, but Riku is ready. He raises his weapon and meets the demon head-on, turning the fight into a close-range contest rather than letting her control the air. The clash becomes too fast for either side to casually disengage. Riku momentarily worries that his next decision may be wrong, realizing that Akira's is far stronger and more adaptable than the assassins he fought on the road. Riku and Akira's exchange rapid blows while King Zane's is ordered to stay back. The royal defenders can only watch as the masked stranger keeps pace with the demon, who just overwhelmed their entire force. Riku begins deliberately accelerating his body with the power he carried from another world. Akira's immediately senses that something has changed, recognizing that his movement is fundamentally different from the local magic she has faced. Riku's nerves sharpen under the urgency of the battle, and his speed and physical weight increase together. Akira's realizes the masked fighter is becoming more dangerous with every exchange, and that the fight has entered a level beyond normal knights. Riku lands a heavy strike and drives Akira's backward. The demon finally loses the effortless confidence she showed against Elatoria's defenders. Akira's opens a more monstrous form, sprouting grotesque appendages and preparing to overwhelm Riku with raw demonic power. Riku watches the transformation without retreating. The transformed demon attacks with multiple crushing limbs, forcing Riku to evade and defend at close range. Even with his enhanced speed, the sheer number of simultaneous attacks makes the exchange dangerous. After the intense clash, Akira abruptly decides to retreat for the day, claiming she only came to hurt the king. She threatens to kill Riku the next time they meet, then tries to withdraw before the masked fighter can stop her. Before escaping, Akira fires Geihin Flare in a massive parting attack at Riku and the people behind him. The scale of the spell is far larger than before, threatening everyone on the rooftop at once. King Zanes panics at the expanded attack, but Riku refuses to retreat. Instead, he calls for Riche, trusting the small spirit to handle a defense on a scale even he cannot cover alone. Riche answers immediately and creates a broad magical barrier that catches the raining projectiles across the entire area. The grid-like shield protects the king and knights, allowing Akira to escape without taking anyone with her. The remaining demons retreat with their commander, ending the raid. Riku pretends he did not use any unusual magic, but the others clearly noticed how extraordinary his techniques were, and begin pressing him for explanations. Riku asks everyone to keep the details of his foreign magic secret because he does not want people outside the group learning how different he is. He regrets that Akira's escaped before they could capture her alive and question her about the Demon King. King Zanes and the Knights thank Riku for intervening, admitting the battle could have ended very differently if he had arrived even a day later. Riku, however, remains uneasy about what the raid revealed rather than celebrating the victory. The king asks Riku about his true strength and the unusual power he displayed. Riku avoids giving a complete answer, knowing that revealing everything about his first otherworld journey would create new political problems. Riku returns to the wounded and casts fairy breath again. The healing magic restores movement to injuries that the local healers had considered severe, stunning the Elatorian soldiers. Riku explains that even his magic cannot restore a completely missing limb, so he is relieved the wounded arms and legs remained intact. Elatoria's healing specialists admit their own spells look weak compared with his, though they can handle the remaining minor injuries. Because he was formally welcomed by the king, Riku receives another round of thanks from the people whose lives he saved. The recognition makes him increasingly uncomfortable with becoming too central to Elatoria's problems. The atmosphere relaxes after the battle, and the royal family temporarily withdraws while the men discuss what happened. Riku's presence has frightened and impressed almost everyone, but he tries to keep the mood from becoming overly formal. The survivors call it a miracle that nobody died and shudder at what would have happened without Riku. The senior commanders, including Nimrose and Zanash, are formally introduced as leaders of Elatoria's Knight Orders. Riku notices that some knights are not entirely grateful and may resent him for stealing their glory. The king nevertheless asks for his help against the demon woman, believing the masked otherworlder is the only person who can reliably defeat her. King Zanes argues that with Riku fighting beside them, Salatoria can defeat Akira's. Riku rejects the request immediately, refusing to become the kingdom's permanent solution simply because he happened to save them once. Riku explains that his participation in the raid was a coincidence, and that this world cannot rely on good fortune every time a powerful demon appears. Helping once is different from taking responsibility for every future battle. He points out that another demon as strong as Akira's could appear after he has already returned to Japan. If Elatoria cannot eventually handle such threats without calling for him, then it has no sustainable future of its own. Riku also reminds Zanes that they still do not know whether he is friend or foe. If the king wants his cooperation, he must offer a genuine benefit rather than simply demand that an outsider risk his life for Elatoria. King Zanes accepts the criticism and recognizes that Riku is speaking to him as a ruler who needs to negotiate more firmly and responsibly. The conversation shifts from pleading for help to finding terms both sides can accept. Zanes considers money, land, honor, and even one of his daughters, but realizes those rewards are meaningless to someone planning to return to another world. He searches for a benefit tied to what Riku actually wants. The king finally offers Elatoria's full assistance in finding a way to send Riku and the other 3 Japanese people home. Until then, the kingdom will provide food and housing if they ever need refuge from Rokarus. Riku accepts the offer as fair and explicitly expects the promise to cover all 4 otherworlders. He jokes that his accommodations should include 3 meals and nap time, sealing the agreement in his usual irreverent style. Riche teases Riku for pretending to be detached, while repeatedly helping people in trouble. Riku admits Freya was hurt because he waited too long to intervene, then turns the conversation back to business and says he needs two things before they can deal with Akira's. First, Riku requests scrap metal, several thin iron swords, strong rope, and long lengths of iron wire. Then he shocks everyone with his second request. Elatoria must openly declare war on Rokaris. The room erupts in disbelief because they had been discussing measures against demons, not starting a human war. Riku confirms that he understands exactly what he is proposing. Riku repeats the plan without hesitation. Elatoria should declare war against Rokaris. His goal is not blind aggression, but to force the hidden political situation into the open, before Rokaris can control the timing. Back in Rokaris, Fuda appreciates small comforts like the castle's flush toilet, but admits the confinement is becoming unbearable. The students have barely been allowed outside since Riku left. Fuda and Mizuki complain about the constant supervision and Captain Pravas hanging around the castle, while training remains the court's top priority. The teenagers are growing stronger but increasingly frustrated by how restricted their lives have become. Kana and Mizuki discuss the adults around them, including the royal magician Luvan and Pravas. They remember Riku's warning not to let their guard down and notice that Mizuki's magic has improved greatly thanks to the secret lessons he gave her. The three students decide to ask Princess Epicharis for permission to explore the city. They know she is scheduled to dine with them, but none of them expects her to approve the request easily. They argue that their training has produced major gains. Fuda can combine swordplay with wind magic, while Kana has mastered powerful fire spells. Epicharis still refuses, saying they remain no match for the knight captains, even if they can beat average soldiers. The princess insists that if demons attacked while the heroes were outside, they would not survive. When the students point out that their public presence was supposed to deter Elatoria, she responds that they must grow stronger as quickly as possible instead. Mizuki senses contradictions in the castle's behavior. Rokaris supposedly has food shortages and approaching war, yet the summoned guests eat like royalty and the knights act strangely calm, making the kingdom feel far too peaceful for the crisis they were told about. During dinner, the students notice that Princess Epicharis is favoring her left arm. She claims she twisted it in a fall and excuses herself early, but Mizuki and the others are no longer willing to accept every explanation without question. The students finally understand why Riku left to investigate the other kingdom. Listening to only one side produces a dangerously biased picture. Kana lets slip a thought about humanity being wiped out, making Mizuki wonder what else she is thinking about. With Riku still away, the teenagers can only hope war does not begin before he returns. Their confidence in Rokaris has weakened, but they still lack enough evidence to know what they should do. Riku contacts them and says that, based on what he has learned, Rokaris currently looks more responsible for the conflict. He cannot fully prove it yet, so he asks them to stall any military deployment for another day while he finishes his plan. Riku asks the students to report even the smallest suspicious changes inside the castle. When they mention Epicharis' injured arm, he immediately treats the detail as potentially important and tells them to keep watching. Freya bursts into Riku's room just after his call, prompting another argument about women casually entering his private space. Riku quickly refocuses and repeats that the key objective is delaying Rokaris' deployment long enough for his plan to work. Freya reports that all the metal, rope, wire, and other materials Riku requested are ready. With the preparations complete, Riku announces that it is time to begin building the device or trap he has designed. Riku and the Elatorian craftsman finish assembling his improvised equipment, weaving iron wire into rope and shaping scrap metal into hooked pieces. He explains that the strange construction is meant to give Akira's a nasty surprise if the demon attacks again. The trap components are laid out and tested, while Riku checks the craftsmanship. Rather than relying only on his own strength, he is preparing ordinary materials that Elatoria's soldiers can use as part of a coordinated defense. Riku returns to the second half of his plan and repeats what he told King Zanes in the audience chamber. Elatoria should deliberately start the war by formally declaring hostilities against Rokaris. Riku predicts that once human war begins, the demon attacks may temporarily stop. He plans to remain in Elatoria until the declaration and defensive preparations are complete, then return to Rokaris before the two armies fully clash. The others initially think Riku is abandoning the demon problem, but he clarifies that the human conflict is the key. He believes resolving the political crisis may also expose the reason the demons have been behaving so strangely. Riku explains the ruthless logic of his plan. Elatoria is the side being pressured, while Rokaris' pro-war movement appears centered on Princess Epikaris and a small faction. By drawing Rokaris' forces away from the castle, he can isolate the people driving the conflict. When asked what he will do about Princess Epikaris, Riku says the worst-case solution is to kill her. The blunt answer horrifies the Elatorians, but he treats assassination as a possibility only if the political leadership cannot be stopped another way. Riku says he will first try to persuade Epikaris face, though he doubts words alone will work after everything that has happened. He admits that his own experiences have left him morally stained, and he does not want the three teenagers to become like him. Ultimately, Riku's real goal is simple: send Futa, Kana, and Mizuki safely home. 10 days pass while Elatoria prepares for the declaration, and Riku waits for the moment to return to Rokaris. After 10 days without another demon raid, Riku says goodbye to Elatoria and prepares to leave. The quiet period allowed Nimrose and the knights to focus on war preparations, but Riku wants to prevent the armies from turning those preparations into a full-scale slaughter. Freya announces that she is accompanying Riku back toward Rokaris, disguised as an adventurer rather than a knight. Nimrose assigned her partly as protection, and partly to monitor Riku, since an Elatorian soldier cannot openly wander through enemy territory. Riku understands why Nimrose chose Freya. She is close enough to him to observe his actions but cannot realistically stop him if he turns hostile. Their conversation also turns to Riku's damaged sword, which he admits he broke by using it recklessly beyond its intended durability. Freya presents Riku with a replacement weapon, and he uses transformation magic to adjust its design to the style he prefers. The gift unexpectedly embarrasses him, while Freya worries about what kind of dangerous modification he is making. With the new weapon ready, Riku and Freya head back toward Rokaris under merchant and adventurer disguises. Freya questions the filthy jars he insists on carrying, while he treats the odd baggage as part of blending in. Elatoria's declaration reaches Rokaris. King Zanes formally rejects Rokaris' demands and announces war. The message instantly turns the court's hidden preparations into an open military crisis. Princess Epikaris is surprised that Elatoria declared first, but remains composed, because Rokaris had already moved Pravas and resonance units near the border. She concludes their secret preparations were correct, even though Elatoria's confidence is greater than expected. Some officials question whether a trade dispute truly justifies war, and whether the ailing king actually approved such drastic action. Epikaris dismisses the hesitation and insists the kingdom must act now. Epikaris reminds Minister Yam that she has been entrusted with full authority in place of her sick father. She forces him to meet her eyes, making it clear that she expects complete loyalty to her orders. Yam immediately obeys and orders the rest of the night orders to mobilize. His enthusiastic declaration that the fun war can begin reveals how little reluctance remains among the princess's inner circle. As mobilization begins, a more sorrowful voice reflects on the approaching war and the summoned heroes. The contrast hints that not everyone inside Rokaris accepts Epikaris' course without doubt. Near the Elatoria-Rokaris border, Riku encounters the same merchant who once warned him about war. The merchant says the border will soon close and jokes that Freya looks more like Riku's daughter than his traveling companion. The merchants reveal that both armies are already moving and advise Riku to leave immediately because the border region will become the front line. Riku thanks them and warns them to survive as well before continuing toward Rokaris. Freya is offended that strangers think she looks like Riku's daughter, especially since she is already 19. Their teasing gives way to a serious discussion about the demons, who have fought humanity for 50 years without ever launching a decisive extermination campaign. Riku questions his old assumption that the Demon King simply wants humanity destroyed. Akira's repeatedly held back even while pressuring Elatoria, suggesting the demons may have a smaller population, or a completely different objective centered on destabilizing human society. Riku proposes that the demons may actually want humans to wage war against one another while they watch from above. If so, the lack of demon attacks after Alatoria's declaration is not coincidence, but evidence that the human conflict itself serves their purpose. Freya asks whether that means Rokaris is knowingly working for the Demon King. Riku refuses to jump to that conclusion, noting that lower-ranking people may know nothing, and that summoning heroes, the Demon King's natural enemies, would make little sense for a fully allied kingdom. Riku and Freya spot Rokaris' army much closer to the border than expected, numbering roughly 3,000 or 4,000 troops. The scale confirms that Epipikaris had prepared for war long before Elatoria's declaration. The sight of the advancing army forces Riku to move quickly. He and Freya change course toward the Rokaris side, trying to reach the people he needs before the armies make contact. Inside Rokaris Castle, Epikaris directly orders Fuda and Kana to participate in the war. They refuse again, saying they will fight the Demon King, but will not take part in a human conflict after only a month of training. Fuda argues that the kingdom summoned them without permission, and now wants them to kill people, giving them no reason to remain locked in the castle. Epikaris calmly interprets their resistance as an intention to leave the country by force. Epikaris tells the heroes they need to understand that they do not actually have the options they think they have. Her tone turns openly threatening, as the pretense of voluntary cooperation begins to disappear. The princess places a hand on Mizuki and uses the powerless accidental summon as leverage. Fuda and Kana finally realize Riku's warning was correct. Rokaris can force the heroes to obey by threatening someone they care about. Meanwhile, Riku reaches the Rokaris advance unit and presents his legitimate passage permit, announcing himself as an otherworlder. He demands to know who is in command, hoping to find Pravas before the army moves any farther. Pravas is shocked, but relieved to see Riku alive. Their reunion immediately turns into their usual rough banter, with Riku complaining about being treated like a suspicious child even after surviving the trip. Riku introduces Freya as an adventurer he hired as a guard, and asks about the 3 students. Pravas reports that Fuda and Kana have resisted orders to fight, and have remained in their rooms, which reassures Riku that they have not willingly joined the invasion. Pravas explains that if the heroes are deployed, he has arranged for them to be placed directly under his command, so he can protect them. Riku is grateful, but presses him on the deeper issue. Whether Pravas also thinks the war and the original hero summoning feel wrong. Pravas admits that Epikaris has changed, but as a knight he feels bound to follow the ruler entrusted with the country. Riku challenges that obedience, asking whether loyalty really requires following her blindly when the nation's course is clearly dangerous. Riku reveals that he personally visited Elatoria and found it suffering from rising monsters, demon raids, and Rokaris' trade demands. He hands Pravas a letter from Nimros, knowing the captain is more likely to trust his longtime friend than Riku's accusations alone. Riku tells Pravas that the final choice of what to believe is his. Rather than wait for an answer, Riku heads back toward the castle, while Freya hurries after him and refuses to let him disappear alone. The group departs the advance camp with no time to waste. Riku's confrontation has planted doubt in Pravas, but the decision of whether the captain will oppose Epikaris remains unresolved. Riku and Freya ride hard away from the camp when mounted soldiers suddenly pursue them. Riku urges Harrier to keep moving while he judges whether the approaching riders intend to stop them by force. The cavalry closes rapidly. Freya worries about Riku, but he keeps moving and prepares for another confrontation. Rather than allowing the pursuers to surround them, Riku hopes they can escape without wasting time, but the pursuing commander easily catches up on horseback and mocks the idea that an old horse carrying 2 people could outrun his unit. He recognizes Riku as the man involved in the princess's earlier complaints. The pursuer introduces himself as Resonant, commander of Rokaris' Crimson Soar Knights. Faced with another veteran commander blocking his route, Riku realizes an unavoidable clash between 2 experienced older fighters is about to begin. Back at the castle, Princess Epikaris keeps Mizuki physically under her control, while Fuda and Kana stare helplessly. Fuda is shocked that even after all their training, they still cannot move against the princess's pressure. Epikaris gives them a simple choice: fight Elatoria or abandon Mizuki and flee. Fuda and Kana immediately recognize the situation as exactly what Riku warned them about. The kingdom summoned even a non-hero like Mizuki so she could be used to control the real heroes. Because Epicharis does not know Mizuki can use magic, Kana suspects they may still have an opening if Mizuki catches the princess off guard. Mizuki understands the silent cue and prepares to cooperate rather than panic. Fuda outwardly gives in and agrees to participate in the war, on the condition that Epicharis does not harm Mizuki. The princess smiles and promises to treat her courteously as long as the heroes obey. Epicharis says Minister Yam will explain the next steps and leaves the heroes under supervision. Fuda, Kana, and Mizuki now have to maintain the appearance of obedience while looking for a chance to escape the hostage situation. Elsewhere, Riku continues dealing with the Rokaris forces and remembers the absurd descriptions attached to the people pursuing him. Even in the middle of a serious military crisis, his irritation at crude rumors and nicknames briefly breaks the tension. Resonant blocks Riku's path and demands that he return to the castle in the middle of the war. Riku points out that Minister Yam himself gave him permission to come and go, but Resonant makes it clear that someone in authority now wants him dead. Resonant admits that assassins had already been sent after Riku and is surprised that he survived them. Riku immediately realizes that one of Resonant's own subordinates was involved, confirming that the attack on him came from inside the kingdom. Riku distinguishes the assassins from the ordinary soldiers and refuses to treat the entire Knight Order as enemies. He tells Reach to hide and avoids needlessly killing people, while Resonant mocks him for running away instead of settling the confrontation head-on. The clash turns physical. Riku catches or stops a blade with one hand, surprising his opponent with strength far beyond what an ordinary man should possess. Even a seemingly small weapon carries more force than Resonant expected. Riku keeps moving with Harrier, while the pursuing knights try to cut him off. The riders realize they are dealing with someone whose speed and strength are anything but normal, and Riku urges Harrier forward through the pressure. Riku apologizes for forcing the aging Harrier through such a dangerous chase. With enemies closing in from more than one direction, he and his companions have to keep moving despite the strain from the horse. Freya refuses to remain passive during the pursuit. Using her archery skills, she begins firing back at the knights chasing them, giving Riku and Harrier room to keep moving. One of the pursuing fighters answers Freya's arrows with wind magic, unleashing a wind lancer. The spell changes the conditions of the chase and makes a straightforward ranged exchange much harder. The sudden use of magic catches the others off guard. What looked like a conventional pursuit now becomes a magical battle, forcing Riku's side to react to an attack they had not expected from an ordinary knight. A wind barrier, or current, throws off Freya's shots, preventing her arrows from reaching their target. She realizes that ordinary archery alone will not easily break through the opponent's magic. Riku warns that making assumptions on a battlefield can get someone killed. Since only Fuda and Kana are publicly known as summoned heroes, his enemies have been treating everyone else as ordinary humans, and that mistaken assumption is now working against them. Riku tests Resonant's blows and finds them simple but surprisingly heavy. He questions whether someone trusted with assassination duties is being manipulated by the princess, but Resonant insists that he admires her strategy and is proud to fight in this war. The two sides close the distance again, and the confrontation becomes a direct melee. Riku prepares to answer the knight's conviction with force rather than further argument. A sword technique called Crimson Blade is unleashed during the duel. The exchange escalates sharply as steel and magic cut through the space between Riku and the attacking knight. Riku overwhelms his opponent in the decisive exchange, condemning the blind loyalty that has driven the knight into the princess's scheme. The fight ends with Resonant taking a severe blow. The surrounding knights believe Riku has killed Captain Resonant and immediately turn on him as an enemy. They are stunned that someone they already suspected was unusual could defeat their captain so quickly. Resonant is revealed to still be alive despite his terrible wound. His survival shocks the nearby knights, while the scene confirms just how hard Riku struck without actually finishing him off. Back at the castle, Fuda and Kana struggle with what to do while Mizuki is being held hostage. They cannot simply attack Epicharis, yet waiting for Riku is also risky, until an incoming call suddenly gives them another option. The call is from Mizuki. She reveals that she secretly kept her smartphone when Epicharis came for her, because she had a bad feeling. She reassures the others that she is uninjured, though she has been locked inside a cell. Mizuki explains that the place does not seem like a normal castle prison because there are no guards around. She chose not to attack Epicharis with magic, knowing that a fight inside the castle could turn everyone against them and that the princess was stronger than she appeared. Mizuki says she has heard another person's voice nearby and decides to investigate rather than escape immediately. Confident that her water magic can get her out if necessary, she promises to report what she learns to Riku and tells the others to be careful. Fuda and Kana are surprised by how calmly Mizuki says she can escape whenever she wants. Their attention shifts to the mysterious person she encountered while imprisoned, suggesting that the dungeon is hiding more than just one hostage. With the situation worsening, Riku races back toward Rokaris on Harrier. He urges the horse to run like the wind, knowing that every delay gives the castle faction more time to act. Riku gives Harrier a brief rest and worries whether the old horse can last all the way to the capital. He also needs to know whether Pravus will continue advancing toward Elatoria, while news that Mizuki has been detained makes speed even more important. Mizuki contacts Riku directly. He is relieved to learn she is safe and marvels at the smartphone that lets the summoned students speak across long distances, even though he still does not fully understand the device. Mizuki tells Riku that other prisoners are being held with her, including merchants from Rokaris. Riku immediately asks whether a man named Thomas is among them, remembering Ted's missing father. Thomas answers that he is there, confirming Ted's father is alive. Riku realizes these imprisoned merchants explain the shortages. Reducing trade lets the authorities blame Elatortura for food problems and manipulate public opinion in favor of war. Mizuki reveals an even bigger secret. The supposedly sick king of Rokaris is imprisoned there too. She tried healing him, but his weakness is severe. And because the prisoners were blindfolded on the way in, she cannot identify the dungeon's exact location. Riku identifies the hidden prison from Mizuki's clues. It lies beneath the castle, accessible through a mechanism in the angel statue in the courtyard. He promises to come for them and tells everyone underground to stay put. With the conspiracy finally taking shape, Riku and Freya enter the royal capital of Rokaris. Riku knows they are racing against time, while Freya quietly resolves not to become a burden during the coming confrontation. Riku catches himself smiling as they approach the end of the crisis. He admits it may be because the entire farce is finally nearing its conclusion, then pushes ahead and tells Freya to keep running if she does not want to be left behind. The weather worsens as Riku and Freya continue toward the capital. With the road becoming rougher, Freya clings tightly during the ride, while Harrier keeps pushing through increasingly difficult conditions. The capital is finally close, but Harrier is visibly nearing his limit. Riku realizes the horse does not even want to stop, because after such an exhausting run, he may not be able to start again once he rests. Harrier's condition forces a hard decision. Riku knows that abandoning the horse would be the most efficient choice, but after everything Harrier has done for them, he refuses to treat his partner as disposable. Riku firmly declares that Harrier is his proud partner and will not be abandoned. He tells Freya to stay behind and let the horse rest while he covers the remaining distance to the capital on foot, even though it means hours of running. Riku gives Freya detailed instructions to return Harrier to Ted's family at the roadside farmhouse and compensate them generously. He also tells her not to raise Ted's hopes yet. They have found Thomas, but they still have to rescue him. Entrusting Harrier to Freya becomes her first independent task on the journey. Riku tells her to meet him later at the Adventurers Guild, or go straight to the castle if he is not there, then sets off alone despite the punishing distance. Riku runs toward Rokaris under his own power, forcing his middle-aged body through the long approach to the capital. With no horse left beneath him, the final stretch depends entirely on his stamina and enhanced physical ability. Inside the castle, the summoned students prepare for the possibility of real combat. They consider taking proper weapons, but worry that unfamiliar blades could make them accidentally kill someone. And they continue waiting for Riku to return. Night finally arrives, and Freya reaches the meeting point ahead of expectations. Riku immediately asks about Harrier and Ted, showing that even with the castle crisis looming, he has not forgotten the people and animal he left behind. Freya reports that Harrier made it back exhausted but safe, and that Ted's family accepted the compensation. Riku finishes a small errand at the Adventurers Guild, then declares that the time has come to head straight for the castle. At the castle gate, Riku is recognized by the same guards who saw him before. He calmly reminds them that he has an official travel pass and was told he could come and go, using the kingdom's own permission to get close without immediately starting a fight. Rather than injure the gatekeepers, Riku uses a hypnosis spell to put them to sleep. Freya is startled by the magic, and Riku explains that in his former world such spells were tightly controlled because of how easily they could be abused for crime. Riku tells Freya to leave the sleeping gatekeepers alone and heads for the courtyard. Their goal is the angel statue Mizuki described, which should conceal the entrance to the underground prison. Freya and Riche watch Riku examine the statue and worry that his solution will once again come down to brute force. For all his experience and intelligence, Riku has a habit of becoming surprisingly rough and simple when time is short. The hidden route under the castle is opened, but the discovery raises a darker question. The presence of unnatural enemies suggests that the demon side may already have infiltrated the royal castle itself. The infiltration becomes a real battle as a demonic creature appears inside the castle. Riku and the others are forced to attack rather than continue the rescue quietly, marking the start of the next phase of the confrontation. Riku identifies the creature as the same kind of low-ranking demon he knew as a lesser devil in his previous world. Freya recognizes the name used in this world as well, confirming another troubling similarity between the two worlds. Riku realizes the possibility of demons being inside the castle is no longer theoretical. Even a low-ranking one is dangerous, and Freya's instant reaction with her sword shows that she is ready to fight beside him. Riku reaches the underground prisoners and calls out for Mizuki. He is relieved to find her alive and safe, while Riche and the others finally reunite after the rushed rescue operation. Freya reaches the underground prisoners and introduces herself as a knight of Elatoria. She reassures the exhausted captives that they are safe now and immediately begins organizing everyone to escape from beneath the castle. Elsewhere in the castle, Futa and the others receive Riku's call. Hearing his voice tells them that he has finally made it back to Rokaris, and they realize that the rescue and escape plan can now move forward. Riku tells the students that he is already in the castle courtyard and has linked up with Mizuki. He orders them to get outside and meet him at the main gate within 10 minutes, promising to come to them if their escape turns dangerous. Futa and Kana begin sneaking through the castle on their own for the first time. With much of the Night Order deployed because of the war, the normally tight defenses are thin enough that Riku's plan suddenly seems possible. The students nearly reach the exit, but a large group blocks their path. They are unsure whether the people ahead are castle soldiers or adventurers, and before they can slip away, Minister Yam calls out to the heroes. Minister Yam confronts the fleeing students, while a surprisingly large crowd gathers nearby. The situation has moved beyond a quiet escape, and the number of witnesses makes it harder for the castle faction to control what happens next. Riku and the guildmaster consider why so many merchants were captured instead of simply killed. The pattern suggests the goal was to disrupt trade, create visible shortages, and push the population towards supporting a war with Elatoria. The guildmaster reveals that Riku lied about Elatoria attacking the castle in order to gather adventurers quickly. Riku admits the deception and points out that among the rescued people are faces the adventurers themselves should recognize. The crowd recognizes missing merchants, including Thomas, and is stunned to see the supposedly ill king among the rescued prisoners. What had been treated as rumors or disappearances is now exposed in front of ordinary citizens and adventurers. Riku explains that the king and merchants had been imprisoned in the castle dungeon. He sends the adventurers away with the rescued captives so they can protect them, leaving the castle faction with far fewer ways to hide what happened. With the prisoners secured, Riku turns his attention to Futa, Kana, and the others. Before everyone can regroup, Epicharis' voice rings out, mocking them as though their attempt to escape proves how cold-hearted they are. Epicharis accuses the heroes of abandoning Mizuki, trying to use the former hostage against them again. The students reject the accusation, but she orders her forces to capture the defiant group, turning the courtyard confrontation into open conflict. Futa, Kana, and Mizuki brace themselves for their first real battle against people from the castle. Before the soldiers can overwhelm them, A huge blast tears through the area, and even the students wonder whether Riku overdid it. The explosion makes Riku's position obvious. His booming voice allows the others to find him immediately, and the scattered groups finally begin converging in the same place for the decisive confrontation. Epicharis is stunned to see Riku alive, and demands to know how he survived. Riku dryly points out that she herself gave him permission to travel, making her reaction an obvious admission that she expected the assassins to finish him. Riku mentions Resonant, revealing that he heard more about the conspiracy from the defeated captain. The students are shocked by the story, and by the rumor that Riku killed him, while Riku is simply relieved to see everyone reunited safely. Fuda, Kana, Mizuki, the guildmaster, the king, adventurers, and knights all gather in the courtyard. With nearly every important witness now present, Riku notes that the actors are finally assembled, and the truth can no longer be buried quietly. The crowd demands explanations for the imprisoned king, the missing merchants, and the manufactured war. Riku deliberately gathered knights, adventurers, and commoners, so that whatever happens next will be witnessed by people from every side. Riku stops treating Epicharis as the true enemy and addresses the being behind her directly. He identifies the presence as Akiras, the powerful demon who has repeatedly attacked Elatoria, implying that the princess has been used as her vessel. The revelation shocks everyone. The princess of Rokaris appears to be connected directly to Akiras. With the conspiracy exposed in front of the assembled witnesses, the conflict enters its final stage. Akiras acknowledges that Riku has seen through the disguise but remains confident. Riku is not surprised by her power or appearance, and the two size each other up now that there is little reason left for the demon to pretend. Realizing the deception has failed, Akiras decides to stop hiding. Riku calls for Riche as the confrontation shifts from political exposure to a direct fight against the demon occupying the princess's body. Riche unleashes an enormous magical attack, astonishing the students with firepower far beyond their own spells. Even Akiras has to react seriously, making it clear that the tiny spirit is far more dangerous than her appearance suggests. The battle erupts around the possessed princess. Those watching struggle to understand how Riku, an apparently ordinary middle-aged man, and his tiny companion can fight a demon whose power dwarfs normal humans. The onlookers finally accept that the princess before them is not acting of her own free will. Whether the cause is possession or transformation, the important fact is the same. The entity controlling her is an enemy. Riku lays out the pattern that made him suspicious. Rokaris repeatedly pushed for war. The monsters and demons conveniently moved in ways that benefited the kingdom's hardliners, and compromise was always rejected. To him, those coincidences point directly to demonic manipulation. Riku says the biggest clue was the contemptuous expression Epicharis wore when looking down on people, the same look he had seen from Akiras. The demon laughs, admitting that an outsider from another world was far harder to manipulate than expected. Riku questions why Akiras went through such an elaborate plan. If demons only wanted humanity dead, they could attack directly. Instead, they summoned heroes, provoked human wars, imprisoned merchants, and carefully managed the crisis from behind the scenes. Akiras finally explains the motive. Demons do not want humans extinct. Human fear, despair, and suffering are a source of power. So the demon side wants humanity alive, controlled, and continually tormented rather than simply wiped out. Riku presses further, asking why the demons have not simply conquered humanity and kept people as livestock. He suspects the answer is connected to the demon king himself and to the sacrifices needed to restore or strengthen him. Akiras is irritated that Riku keeps uncovering the logic behind her actions. Since the secret is already exposed, she abandons the discussion and declares that everyone present can simply die, turning the courtyard into a battlefield. Dark power spreads through the assembled forces as Akiras begins the attack. Soldiers who appeared human only moments earlier start reacting to the demon's influence, throwing the entire courtyard into chaos. One soldier suddenly transforms into a lesser devil. Riku orders the adventurers to evacuate the rescued merchants and the king while the fighters stay behind, making civilian protection the immediate priority. Riku and the students attack the transformed soldiers, while black demonic matter spreads from their bodies. The fight becomes more dangerous, because the enemies are not invading monsters, but people from the castle being turned into vessels. Riku explains that once a human becomes a lesser devil, there is no simple way to restore them if this world follows the same rules as his previous one. The revelation is grim. Familiar soldiers who transform can no longer be treated as ordinary people. Akira's confirms that not everyone can be used as a vessel. A person's willpower and magical resistance determine whether possessions succeed, and she cruelly tells one resistant man that he could have become a beautiful vessel if only he were weaker. Riku leaves Fuda, Kana, and Mizuki to handle the lesser devils while he focuses on Akira's. The students accept the division of roles and prepare to fight together, trusting Riku to confront the strongest enemy. Riku finally faces Akira's directly and begins questioning her about the Demon King and the possession of Epikaris. With the surrounding battle underway, he tries to extract whatever information he can before committing to a finishing blow. Akira's and Riku trade attacks while continuing their tense exchange. Neither is willing to give the other an easy opening, and the duel separates from the wider fight against the transformed soldiers. Akira's asks whether Riku really intends to kill her, even if doing so also kills Princess Epikaris. Riku answers that possession, transformation, or imitation makes little difference to him if the princess has already been consumed by the demon. Riku reveals the reason for his cold answer. In his previous world, someone he loved was taken over by the demon side. For the sake of that world, he ultimately killed her himself rather than let the possession continue. The students overhear enough to realize that Riku once killed a person he loved. The revelation gives them a glimpse of the experience behind his ruthless decisions and explains why he refuses to hesitate in front of another possession case. Riku tells Akira's that he barely knows the real Epikaris and will not risk everyone else for her. He also openly mentions that this is his second time being sent to another world, but the students are far more shaken by learning that he once killed someone he loved. Having decided that Akira's will not provide anything more useful, Riku raises his weapon and says farewell. He prepares to kill the demon, even if the princess cannot be separated from her. Riku launches the finishing attack, but another sword suddenly intercepts his blade before it can reach Akira's. The unexpected intervention surprises both Riku's allies and the demon. The newcomer is Pravas, commander of the kingdom's National Guard. Riku greets him almost casually, but Pravas' decision to enter the battle leaves everyone uncertain about which side he intends to support. Pravas tells Riku that he finally made it back after defeating Resonant and leaving the front. His arrival confirms that the Knight Commander deliberately returned to the castle once the truth behind the war began to unravel. Before Pravas can explain himself fully, one of his own knights, Amanda, transforms into a lesser devil. The sight forces him to confront the fact that demonic possession has spread through the forces he was sworn to command. Pravas realizes that most of the red-winged knights who suffered strange changes were likely turned into lesser devils. The revelation explains the unnatural strength and devastating casualties around the kingdom, and helps him understand why Riku came back to the castle. Even after learning the truth, Pravas stands between Riku and the possessed Epikaris. Riku demands to know why he is protecting her, when he already understands that the person controlling her is a demon. Pravas explains that his actions come from the oath he swore as a knight of Rokaris. Whatever has happened, he still considers protecting Princess Epikaris his duty, and cannot simply stand aside while Riku cuts her down. Riku says Pravas' stubborn honesty is exactly why he trusted him with the truth in the first place. He respects the knight's loyalty, but also reminds him that their difference in strength means Pravas stopped him by force. Pravas attacks anyway, and Riku answers without hesitation. The brief exchange ends with the Knight Commander knocked down, demonstrating the huge gap between an elite local warrior and the experienced former hero. Pravas admits that he had hoped he might have a chance, but Riku's power is simply too far beyond a normal human's. Riku answers that the explanation is simple. He came from another world. Riku explains a pattern he has noticed from himself, Fuda, Kana, and Mizuki. People summoned from another world seem to possess magical capacity on a completely different scale from the natives of this world. With that enormous reserve of magic, Riku can reinforce his body far beyond local human limits. His former master also taught him how to control that power, instead of merely releasing it blindly, which is what makes his physical abilities so extreme. Riku demonstrates the result with movements Pravas can barely follow. He also praises the sword Pravas gave him, noting that although his strength is not literally unlimited, the weapon is sturdy enough to survive the power he puts through it. Even after seeing the gap between them, Pravas refuses to back down. He knows he cannot defeat Riku, but his responsibility to the princess will not let him abandon the fight, simply because victory is impossible. A faint voice suddenly reaches the heroes from inside Epicurus's body. The real princess is still conscious and begs them to kill her, while Akirus angrily tries to suppress the resistance from her host. Riku immediately understands what the voice means. Epicurus has not been completely consumed. Pravas insists that if her consciousness remains trapped inside, they have even more reason to save her, rather than kill both host and demon together. Riku notices that Akirus is far weaker while possessing Epicurus than she was during the battle in Elatoria. He threatens to kill the body anyway, calculating that the demon will be forced to abandon her host if she wants any chance to survive. Akirus complains that everything Riku says and does is irritating, but she has no intention of dying together with the princess merely to spite him. His threat succeeds in forcing the demon to make a choice. Akirus finally leaves Epicurus's body and appears in her true demonic form. Riku remarks that the expression suits her personality far better, while Pravas rushes to the collapsing princess. Riku orders Pravas to get Epicurus to safety. The others stare at Akiras's winged form in alarm, recognizing that the enemy standing before them is a genuine high-ranking demon rather than a human princess. Now free of the princess's body, Akirus and Riku begin their real duel. She dives at him from the air, and Riku meets the opening attack head-on with his sword. Akirus tries to exploit her ability to fly and attack from above, but Riku anticipated exactly that advantage. He reveals that he prepared a small plan specifically to stop her from simply controlling the fight from the sky. Riku activates his prepared equipment and launches a hooked line toward Akirus. Instead of chasing a flying demon with raw speed, he uses a simple restraint tool to drag the battle back within reach. More lines fire and catch Akirus, and the others recognize the device as something Riku had helped create earlier. The improvised anti-demon equipment begins restricting her movement before she can regain altitude. Riku laughs after successfully catching Akirus with one of the lines and yanks hard on the rope. The demon is pulled off balance, as his prepared trap proves effective against her aerial mobility. Multiple anchored lines slam Akirus against the castle wall and pin her in place. For a moment, Riku's trap completely neutralizes the advantage of her wings and forces her into a stationary target. Akirus refuses to stay restrained and lashes out at the lines. Riku braces himself as she starts breaking free, realizing that the trap has bought time, but is not strong enough to hold a high-ranking demon indefinitely. Akirus tears herself loose and points out that Riku has not fully recovered from his previous injuries. She also knows he cannot simply heal himself, and she taunts him for entering another brutal fight while already damaged. Riku refuses to be intimidated, but Akirus decides to become serious as well. She calls the remaining lesser devils to her side, and the surrounding monsters begin converging on her body. Akirus absorbs or fuses with the gathered lesser devils, covering herself in a grotesque mass of demonic flesh. The onlookers can only stare as her power and physical form swell at once. A dense sphere of dark energy forms around the transformation and erupts with tremendous force. Riku and the others are forced to brace themselves while Akirus completes whatever new form she is creating. Akirus emerges from the demonic mass in a far more monstrous battle form, with huge wings and reinforced limbs. The transformation makes it clear that the restrained version Riku fought earlier was nowhere near her maximum combat state. The powered-up Akirus moves fast enough to slip past Riku's guard and graze him before he can fully respond. She mocks him as slow, signaling that the speed difference has changed dramatically. Akirus attacks again from Riku's blind side with frightening speed. His companions shout a warning as the demon's strike reaches him, almost before anyone else can follow the movement. Riku narrowly avoids the attack and admits it was close. The exchange confirms that Akirus's transformed speed is now dangerous even to him, forcing him to abandon any relaxed approach to the duel. Pravas recognizes the display as the true power of a high-ranking demon. Akirus tells Riku she is only getting started, making it clear that the fight has entered a completely different level. Akirus continues her high-speed assault, forcing Riku to defend against attacks coming from multiple angles. He can no longer rely on simply reading her movements and countering at leisure. The demon tears across the battlefield in another violent rush. Riku keeps his footing amid the impacts, but the surrounding damage shows how little room for error remains. Riku and Akira's exchange another series of rapid attacks, with neither side landing an immediate finishing blow. The duel becomes a contest of endurance, timing, and who can expose the other's weakness first. Riku compares Akira's to the strongest demons from his previous world, and judges her closer to one of a demon king's top commanders than an ordinary high-ranking demon. Realizing he cannot win safely at this pace, he prepares to use a hidden trump card. Akira's grows irritated by Risei's defensive magic, which keeps interfering with her attempts to finish Riku. She mocks him for relying on the tiny spirit, but Riku points out that she already missed her best opportunity while she was still inside Icarus. Riku calls for a change in strategy and Risei responds, altering her firm, or the magic supporting him. The small companion prepares to contribute directly to Riku's next weapon, rather than only shielding him. Risei's magic gathers around Riku's arm and weapon as Icarus closes in again. The setup gives Riku a new way to threaten the demon, despite the enormous difference in speed. Akira's is shocked to see Riku holding a newly formed sword. What looked like a minor support spell has become a specialized weapon, forcing her to reevaluate how dangerous Risei's assistance really is. Riku reveals the blade's purpose. Anything demonic that it touches is destroyed in a burial rite effect. Against an enemy like Akira's, even a single clean hit could be far more dangerous than an ordinary wound. Akira's immediately recognizes the weapon as a serious threat and accelerates further. Riku knows he has to keep up long enough to land one decisive strike before her speed overwhelms him. The spectators can barely understand what they are seeing, as Riku and Akira's move faster and faster. Even Riku's allies struggle to track the exchange, while the demon continues pressing him with superior speed. Akira's lands what appears to be a decisive hit, and confidently assumes Riku is finished. The speed of the attack makes it look as though he had no time to avoid it. The clash continues in a blur, with Akira's believing she has finally caught Riku cleanly. For a moment, the outcome is hidden by the speed and force of the exchange. Riku reveals that he actually dodged the fatal part of the attack, though he lost a hand in the process. He used the injury to create an opening and immediately launches a counterattack with his anti-demon blade. Akira's realizes Riku deliberately accepted a terrible wound to force her into range. The sacrifice shocks her, because he traded part of his own body for the one chance he needed to strike back. Riku explains that he has already seen her attack pattern too many times. Rather than trying to pin down her speed, he waits for the instant she commits to attacking him and counters in that unavoidable moment. Akira's accepts the exchange and dares Riku to keep trading blows, confident that demons possess far greater vitality than humans. She believes a battle of mutual injuries will inevitably end in her victory. Akira's boasts that as long as enough of her body remains, she can regenerate repeatedly. Her confidence rests on healing through damage that would permanently cripple a human opponent. Riku points out the flaw in that advantage. Regeneration may restore flesh, but it does not erase the pain. He keeps forcing Akira's through repeated injuries, turning her own endurance into something she has to suffer through again and again. Risei continues supporting Riku with defensive magic, while he maintains the brutal exchange. Akira's realizes the tiny spirit's shield is preventing her from converting her superior vitality into the easy victory she expected. Akira's taunts Riku that he is already missing limbs and that his speed is dropping, then keeps pressing him at close range. Even in that condition, Riku continues meeting her attacks instead of backing away. The extreme magic output is taking a heavy toll on Riku's body, but he forces himself to keep going. As Akira's prepares to finish the fight, Riku steadies himself and accepts the final exchange. Watching the two clash, the others can barely believe a human can fight at this level. They realize that Riku, despite being another otherworlder like them, comes from an experience and standard of battle completely different from their own. Riku drives straight through Akira's attack and lands his decisive counter. He declares that this is how a human who once defeated the Demon King fights. Riku tells Akira's goodbye as her body begins breaking apart. Akira's is stunned that something capable of causing this had been mixed in among the humans who were summoned, something no one had warned her about. As Akira's continues disintegrating, She can only wonder what kind of man Riku really is and what he is made of. Her final thoughts turn toward the Demon King before she disappears completely. The students and the others stare in shock at the aftermath of Akira's defeat. Riku, badly injured and missing an arm and a leg, finally lets out a breath while everyone rushes toward him. Riku casually says the fight was rough and asks the others to pick up his severed arm and leg, because they should still be lying nearby. The students are horrified by how calmly he treats injuries that severe. With Akira gone, Riku looks over the ruined battlefield and says the matter is settled for now. The brutal battle at Rokaris Castle has finally come to an end. After the battle at Rokaris Castle, Fuda recuperates in his room while remembering the terrifying exchange between Riku and Akira's. The strain from using magic to strengthen his body is still lingering. Riku finds Fuda trying to move around again. Fuda explains that magically boosting his muscles left him with such severe full-body soreness that he could barely move for 2 days, while Riku jokes that the delayed soreness means he is getting old. Riku asks Fuda to show him his arm and examines the remaining injury. He admits that even a small cut hurts badly and says defeating a high-ranking demon was brutal, making Fuda realize again how extraordinary Riku's endurance is. Riku explains that he is there precisely so the students do not have to fight enemies on Akira's level. He identifies Akira as an executive-class demon, among the Demon King's strongest direct subordinates, and warns Fuda not to treat such battles as something he must rush into. Riku praises Fuda for being serious and responsible, but warns that people with that personality often die quickly because they push themselves too hard. He tells Fuda that being able to hold his own against ordinary humans is already enough for now, and that he should grow stronger patiently. Before leaving Fuda's room, Riku asks whether he has seen Kana because he has business with her. Fuda says he has not seen her since breakfast, and suggests checking the training grounds, where Mizuki should be practicing. At the training grounds, Mizuki is practicing archery by herself. Her stance and shooting form clearly reflect the Kyudo experience she had before being summoned. Riku recognizes Mizuki's Kyudo background and watches her adjust to the different bow used in this world. He tells her he would rather none of the students have to fight, but if they remain trapped here, they still need enough skill to protect themselves. Riku admits there is no guarantee defeating the Demon King will automatically send them home, because his own return in the past may not repeat the same way. Mizuki understands the uncertainty, while Riku promises he will do everything he can to make sure they all get home. Mizuki thanks Riku and says hearing that eases her mind. When Riku asks where Kana is, Mizuki says she has not seen her since morning, leaving Riku wondering where the energetic girl has run off to. Mizuki asks Riku to stop using an honorific with her because Kana is the only one he addresses so casually. Riku agrees and starts calling her simply Mizuki. While searching the castle, Riku meets Leuven, who says Kana is neither in her room nor at the training grounds, and is probably roaming freely now that she can move again. Leuven then tells Riku that the king and princess want to see him in the audience chamber. Leuven explains that the king is recovering and that his supposed illness was a lie created by Akira. In reality, he had been severely malnourished and exhausted after being imprisoned. She also says Lady Epikaris has already returned to her duties despite the guilt she carries over what she did while possessed. Riku meets the king, who personally thanks him for saving the kingdom. The king stresses that without Riku both nations would have suffered catastrophic losses, while Pravus admits they still could not save everyone, even though the casualties were kept unusually low. The king says Riku deserves to be hailed as a hero, but Riku argues that news of Akira's defeat should not spread. For the sake of both Rokaris and Elatoria, he proposes hiding her death while maintaining the appearance that their conflict is still continuing. Riku explains that if the Demon King's forces learn Akira is dead, they may simply send another demon to replace her. By continuing controlled minor skirmishes without casualties, the two kingdoms can preserve the deception and buy time while Freya serves as their envoy. Drawing on his experience from his previous world, Riku says demon executives tend to act independently and share far less information than human organizations. He plans to use that weakness while helping the kingdom rebuild its night order and improve its anti-demon equipment. The princess is ashamed that the students were forcibly summoned, and that the kingdom still has not properly repaid Riku. When she wonders whether he will stay, Riku says they will eventually have to leave, whether their goal becomes defeating the Demon King or finding another route home. Riku jokingly tells Pravus that next time he should be the knight who protects the princess, leaving both of them flustered. A call from the kitchen then catches Riku's attention and leads him toward Kana. Riku finally finds Kana working in the castle kitchen, where she has already cut her finger again while cooking. He cannot understand why the hero is in the kitchen, while Kana cheerfully insists on preparing something for him. Kana says Riku has been bedridden since the battle, and that she wants him to eat something nourishing so he recovers faster. Riku finds her loud and troublesome, but also recognizes that she is genuinely kind and cannot simply ignore her effort. Kana proudly reveals the huge pot of food she has made. The dark, bubbling mixture looks and smells so ominous that Riku and the others recoil despite all the work she put into it. Kana enthusiastically explains that she used high-protein mystery fish from the castle pond, unidentified livestock, livers, vegetables, something cheese-like, and several other ingredients. Riku is horrified, especially when Mizuki asks whether Kana even removed the blood and organs before cooking everything. Mizuki reminds Kana that Riku had been looking for her. As Kana speaks about the promise that Riku will protect them and that they will all return home together, Riku realizes why that promise matters so much to her. Riku apologetically returns Kana's ribbon after carrying it through the battle and badly damaging it. He says he could probably repair it with magic, but no longer remembers its exact original shape and expects her to be angry. Instead of getting mad, Kana simply thanks Riku for returning the ribbon and says it was damaged because he protected them. She tells him to leave it as it is, while Riku is caught off guard by how readily she accepts it. With Riku recovering, Freya gone on her mission, and the immediate crisis finally over, the students settle back down. Riku notes that Rakaris and Elatoria should enjoy some peace for a while, and the group warmly welcomes one another back after the chaos. Riku finally returns to ordinary castle life, only for Kana to push another enormous serving of food toward him before it gets cold. The peaceful comedy sharply contrasts with the deadly battle that just ended. Elsewhere, inside a grand religious hall, a mysterious figure senses that someone is approaching. A voice quietly announces that the hero is coming. The scene shifts to a sacred nation where an old prophecy is invoked. A hero shall come to this holy land. The ominous declaration signals the beginning of a new arc. Chapter 21 opens with the group riding in a carriage, while a horde of monsters chases them through a narrow route. Riku orders Fuda not to slow down as the girls prepare to attack the pursuers from the moving wagon. The monsters keep pouring, after the carriage with no visible end. Riku tells Kana and Mizuki to fire, while the group tries to keep the swarm from reaching the wagon. As the carriage races forward, Riku notices another obstacle directly ahead. What first looks like another enemy force makes him abruptly focus on the road in front of them. The obstacle is revealed to be a formation of armed skeletons blocking the route. The group suddenly finds itself caught between the pursuing monsters and an undead force ahead. A heavily armored skeleton stands among the undead confronting the travelers. The story then jumps back 1 month to show how Riku and the students prepared for this journey. 1 month after the battle with Akiras, Kana has become comfortable riding a horse thanks to daily practice. Riku credits Mizuki as an excellent teacher and sees that the students' travel training is paying off. Sawara and Harrison, the 2 horses used during the group's travel training, prove to be excellent mounts as well. During training, the students successfully bring down a giant black eagle in a single coordinated attack. Riku introduces a ballista as another way to strengthen the kingdoms against demons, allowing even soldiers who cannot use magic to fight at range. He notes that heavy reliance on magic kept this world from developing some weapons and technologies that existed in his previous world. After a month of preparations, Riku judges that the students have learned most of what they need for travel. With the anti-demon ballistas being deployed and the Night Order reorganized, he decides it is almost time for their group to leave. The king and princess meet the group before departure. They report that there have been no demon attacks for the past month, and that repeated mock battles between the 2 kingdoms have strengthened their soldiers, leaving the rest of the mission in Riku's hands. Before Riku leaves, the princess apologizes for not being fully conscious during the summoning incident. and raises a new clue. She has heard that the Saintess of the Holy Kingdom of Grancia can perform a summoning ritual, immediately catching Riku's attention. The princess explains that otherworlder summoning is not unique to their kingdom, and that heroes have allegedly been summoned in other lands as well. She mentions stories of a hero summoned around 50 years ago, and another recent summoning connected to the renewed demon attacks. Because even Akira's did not seem to know everything about the summoning, Riku decides they need more information. The group agrees that asking the Saintess directly is the best lead, making the Holy Kingdom of Grancia their first major destination. The story shifts to the Holy Kingdom of Grancia, the destination tied to the Saintess and the summoning mystery. Inside its imposing religious complex, a hooded figure waits in silence before a curtained hall. Before leaving Rokaris, Riku visits the guildmaster to ask for practical travel information about reaching Grancia. The princess has already told the guildmaster to provide Riku with the details he needs. The guildmaster lays out the route. Travel from Rokaris through Elatoria into Boltania, cross the Cristanian Valley, and then continue to the Holy Kingdom of Grancia. By carriage, the trip should take more than 2 months, giving the group a chance to stop in Elatoria and see Freya along the way. The guildmaster gives the travelers guild licenses and explains the rank system from iron rookie plates, up through bronze, silver gold, platinum, and black hero class. Riku deliberately chooses a gold license rather than a rarer top rank, so he has useful identification without attracting unnecessary attention. The other 3 students receive silver licenses, already above the rookie and bronze, ranks common for people their age. The guildmaster explains that the guild does not keep detailed personal profiles, while the enchanted plates are difficult to forge and can identify them as adventurers in any country. The guildmaster adds that high ranks are not casually granted, so the system remains useful even without a massive informations network. Riku compares the plates to driver's licenses from Japan, while the guildmaster confirms that their carriage and supplies have already been prepared and paid for by the princess. Outside, the group finds Sawara and Harrison, harnessed to a fully equipped carriage. Riku is surprised the princess bought the horses for them. But the gift makes sense, after all the practice the students put into learning to handle them. When Riku sees the mountain of luggage prepared for the long trip, he solves the problem with storage magic. The crates vanish into his storage space, dramatically reducing what the carriage has to carry. Fuda takes the driver's seat, and Riku notes that the lighter carriage will put much less strain on the horses. The guild staff see them off, and tell the group to visit again when they return. Just before departure, the king and princess arrive to see the travelers off in person. They thank Riku again for everything, and ask him to rely on Rokaris if he ever needs help, while the group waves farewell from the carriage. With the preparations complete, Riku gives the order to depart for Elatoria first. The carriage rolls out through the castle gate, and the group's long journey officially begins. The trip initially feels calm and refreshing, but the peace does not last. Riku learns that with Akira's gone, monsters have begun appearing on the Rokaris side of the region as well, explaining the danger they soon encounter on the road. Riku steps forward to deal with the monsters threatening the carriage, while Fuda, Mizuki, and Kana watch behind him. Knowing this journey will be even longer than the last, and that he is responsible for 3 high schoolers, Riku can only hope nothing too troublesome happens along the way.